I'm Jim Knight, co-founder of the Instructional Coaching Group, and you're listening to Coaching Conversations, where I talk with coaching experts from around the world so that all of us can learn better ways to make an unmistakably positive impact on the people around us. Well, this is kind of a dream come true, and I'm really grateful to the three of you, my good friends, to this coaching conversation. For years, I've listened to, when I was growing up, for years, I listened to Peter Zowski's conversation. He would have different panels come in and discuss things. And I thought, someday I want to do that. I want to bring together three people I love to talk to, three friends, and have that. And today's the day. Today I get to live it out. So this is my dream come true to have this conversation. And I want to welcome my friends here. Haesun Moon is the director of the Center for Brief Coaching at the University of Toronto, the author of several books, including the best-selling Coaching A to Z. And Haesun joins us from Toronto. Hi, Haesun.
Hey, and thank you for saying A to Z, not A to Z. Thank you.
Well, I am Canadian, let's be clear on this. So it's not a problem, but it's just naturally for me to do that. But it is kind of, I've got to get that Canadian thing out there. Christian van Nieuwerburgh is the chair of the Coaching and Positive Psychology Department at the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, author of many texts on coaching, most recently Radical Listening with Robert Biswas-Diener. And Christian joins us today from Warwickshire, England. Hello, Christian.
Hi, I'm so delighted to be here. It's just so exciting to be part of something that I've heard you talk about for a little while. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Oh, it's more than allowing. I'm grateful for you being here. And then Michael Bungay Stanier is the founder of Box of Crayons and MBS Works, the author of many books, including The Coaching Habit, the most popular coaching book in this millennia. And Michael joins us today from Toronto. So we have two Torontonians,
Perfect.
a Canadian in Nebraska, and a Warwickshire person. Hi, Michael. It's great to have you.
Hey, Jim. It's nice to have you too. If you're channeling Peter Zowski, don't you need to be a chain smoker? I mean, I think you need to light up and just have that kind of deep, kind of tuberculosis type gravel to your voice.
Yeah, it didn't work out too well for him, that smoking thing.
That's true. Okay, so maybe this is a good 21st century reinvention of that process.
Zowski is kind of the Gretzky of conversations in my mind. He's the greatest interview I've ever heard. So any kind of comparisons are kind of like comparing my skating to Gretzky's. It's not quite the same.
Well, I'm not sure that metaphor works anymore since Gretzky's become aligned with political forces in the States. He's now no longer beloved in Canada by many people. So you'll have to update. You're going to have to update your hockey metaphor there as well.
Well, plus my email or my Twitter handle is JimKnight99. So I'm going to have to think about it. Or I'll come up with another story for 99.
All right.
So here's what I'm thinking about today. I have friends here, and each of you have written about.
That's an overly confident statement. Are you sure about that? I mean, do we like
find
you,
out today.
or
I'm a little
just
concerned.
kind of like?
Concerned.
I mean, I know. Look, Christian kind of like you. Haesun could go either way. I'm really clear where I stand with you, Jim. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a friend am I to each? No, we'll leave it at that. Okay, so
10, Jim. And
each of you has spoken in ways that are both helpful and thoughtful about a question that's been on my mind a lot recently, which is how to be a friend in unfriendly times. There's plenty of evidence today that loneliness is a global problem. Vivek Murthy, in his book Together, he goes through it systematically and he shows how around the world loneliness is an issue. And he, in fact, when he became Surgeon General under President Obama's rule, he said loneliness was the greatest threat to health in America. And then he pointed out that it's not just America, it's a global thing. He had data from England, from Canada, from Japan, from Australia. And so my topic for today, based on that, is how to be a friend in unfriendly times. You could make the case that we need friends now more than ever, and yet it seems that it's harder and harder to be a good friend. So I wanted to explore this with you, possibly my friends, and let's start with a simple question. What's your first reaction to this topic? And I'll start with you, Christian. What's your first reaction?
Yeah, I love the question. And the first unfriendly time that I thought about was the pandemic. And it just felt like a time of disconnection. And I think back to how important my friends were and how I connected with them virtually. And how, in fact, it strengthened friendships. So I guess my take on it is, how do unfriendly times how it's an opportunity for us to invest in important relationships.
Mm.
Haesun, what's your thoughts?
I think, Jim, as you mentioned, that we have spoken about coaching and so on, and then this topic of friend and friendship. It's almost like is that Miles Davis who said he only hangs out with business people because they talk about music, because musicians talk about money.
Oh,
So it's almost like it's so refreshing to be talking
Mm.
about a topic like this. And when you say unfriendly times, I'm just thinking that's an assumption that times are unfriendly. There are times that's unfriendly, but I can relate to that because there are times when I hear people chewing loudly. Those are unfriendly times, and how can I stay friendly? So, anyway, that's my first couple reactions.
There's a name for that. The dislike of
I'm
people who chew
sure.
loud. I don't know what it is, but my wife is afflicted with the same issue. So
That's great.
be
It's like,
sure to
what's
sit.
up with this?
Yeah, when we get together at the Teaching, Learning, Coaching Conference, be sure to sit at the other end of the table from me because I think it's an issue. And then, Michael, what's your reaction to the topic?
Well, I've never had more friends than I have right now. It's fantastic. No, I'm kidding. The unfriendly times cast the context quite wide, quite broadly, and I'm like, that may be true, that may be not true. I do think it is just A, hard to find your people, and B, to keep hold of them once you've found them. And I think that's difficult a lot of the time, because sometimes you have ebbs in your life or flows in your life where you find your people, and then you have other times where you're kind of ebbing away from your people. So regardless of the nature of the times, it's just, this is a tricky thing, and it's a big issue. It's a lonely time. I'm not sure if it's an unfriendly time, but it's a lonely time. And anything we can do to try and nurture the friendships we have and find new people to connect with, then we're all better for it.
It makes me think, Jim, that this idea of finding your people, that's a great phrase. My reflection is that you have to put out what you're passionate about, right? You have to actually say what you stand for in order to find your tribe. And for a long time professionally, I didn't really want to do that too hard. I didn't want to push too hard. I didn't want to say, this is my view or anything like that. So I guess reflecting back, it's difficult to find your tribe if you're not telling people, this is the things I'm interested in.
And also, Michael, when you say it's one thing to find them, but also keeping them.
Yeah.
And I'll keep them as long as they don't chew loud, or like slurp their soup or something. I'm keeping them.
Yeah.
Well, I think I don't know if it's a paradox, but it's an issue in life that I think we're wired for connection and we have a hard time connecting. And you can connect at a superficial level. You can be polite and courteous, but to find people who, you really have a deep connection with. And the other thing is, and maybe this is more a case in the United States than in Canada or England, but the other thing is, because of politics, it's getting harder and harder for people to come together. It used to be in the United States, Thanksgiving was a holiday where families would come together and people couldn't wait to get together with everyone. And now people are saying, well, I can't take those conversations. I'm not going to go home for Thanksgiving. So it is a tough time. Christian, now your new book, Radical Listening. Radical Learners is a different story, but Radical Listening, which you and I went to New York and we saw the big window and the Barnes and Noble with the new book. The book is about the art of connecting. So tell us a bit about what you think is the art of connecting.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And it is to do with this time that we're in, I think. And I'm a hopeless optimist and very naive. And I was thinking, what's needed right now? How do we connect in a world that seems disconnected? And maybe it is, maybe it's not. But for me, I thought, well, as a coach, and all of us here are coaches, we know how powerful listening can be, not as a way of understanding or even as a way of communicating, but a way of showing people we value and respect them. So radical listening really is taking that idea and trying to share it more widely. that actually one of the most powerful ways of connecting with others is through listening to them in a way that shows that you see value and hear them. And again, in a very naive way, my hope is that connecting is step one towards dialogue. So once we connect with someone by showing interest, by being open to their ideas, by accepting that they might have views completely opposite to mine, by listening to them, I'm building a connection. And on that connection, we might be able to build conversation and dialogue. So that's what radical listening is about.
Yeah, when I hear you say that, Christian, I mean, partly this it makes me think about, well, what are the different natures of friendships that I have? Because I agree absolutely with what you're saying around, in general, a connection with people. People want to be seen and want to be heard. You want to see them and you want to hear them. And when we do that, we live in a more civilized place.
Yes.
I do that. I think I do that pretty well. And I also do it with a lot of people who aren't my friends and won't be my friends. And I'll tell you how I stole something from a British academic, I've forgotten his name. It's embarrassing. Anyway, he says, basically, we can manage at most about 150 friends in our world. It's a something number. And what's more, he says, within those 150, there are different levels of intimacy. Roughly, there's roughly 1.5, 2 people who are your super inside circle. There's probably another 3 or 4 people who are your super close folks, the people who you take a call from at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then it kind of expands out to different levels of interaction. And part of the quest for me is to go, like, as I think of it, who am I? Dunning. His name is Dunning, the Dunning number. Who are my people, and how do I rank them? Because I think this is for me, one of the insights around friendship is not all people are created equal. I do want to connect with people at a real level, but I just can't connect with everybody. And I want to overinvest in my top 15 people and underinvest in people's 75 through 150 and completely ignore the people outside my 150 who are clamoring for my attention. But the price I pay for giving them attention is moving attention away from other people who I want to invest more in.
And I remember one of those calls, Christian, that you had about the book. Somebody mentioning about radical, the root word of radical meaning like roots.
Yeah.
And I think of it as also, Michael, when you talk about attending, like giving them attention or attending, whatever you attend will grow like roots. And by listening, you're growing something. And what is it? What is growing? By listening is attending. So what's growing by what are we attending to? And I'm just reminded of that, radical listening. What are we growing?
I'm very interested in this topic because I feel like there's unrealized potential with respect to the concept of friendship. And it may be because we try to be friends, or I try to be friends with too many people. It may be because I'm not intentional enough in building it, but I feel like there's more that could happen. And that more is really, really important because these are indeed lonely times. So I think it's an interesting and challenging thing. Now, Haesun, you've written a lot about dialogue. Dialogue is central to yours and to your work. And one of the things I'm wondering about is people whose views are different than ours. And sometimes different in ugly ways, not just the way they eat their food, but racist comments, or sometimes subtly racist comments. Like they'll make a joke and you can't really call them out exactly on it, racism, because it's not explicitly racist, but they'll quote somebody else who's a comedian who says something or something. And I'm wondering, and I think this is a question for the times. How do we hold true to our values and at the same time interact with people whose views we differ with? Or do we just say, I'm not going to talk to those people? But it's hard to do that if it's a family member or a friend of the family and those kind of things. So how do we process that issue when it comes to interacting with? And when I talk about unfriendly times, this is to some extent what I'm talking about, how people get locked into polarized views of the world that are, from my perspective, dehumanizing. What's your
Mm.
thoughts about that?
I'm thinking about how when we say when you mention dialogue or dialogic, I think of it as we have this willingness to come to a conversation with my logic and your logic and our logic across the table, dialogic. And
Yeah.
often when we don't agree, then we're not willing to generate other ideas. So we become dialectic. So either I win or you win. And most out of it is compromise. And when somebody says that we agree to disagree, I don't even know what that means, and I don't like that statement at all. And when I think about unfriendly times, I often think about, yeah, so what would happen when my nephew is like teenage boy and then I am probably reaching menopause? I mean, that's going to be very fun times in my house. And at the same time, I think, what does it mean to have a friendship? And just thinking about the root word of any word that has a ship in it, like leadership, it's a skill. Ship means a skill. So friendship means it's a skill of being a friend. And now the word friend, it comes from a word, you can translate friendship as a skillful loving. It means to love.
Mm.
So when I think about the word friendship, it's a skill of loving. And when you have a skill, it also you can assume that you can apply it or not. It's a choice. So for me, friendship is more of a choice that I know how to love, but who and when and how do I love it? So then I remember when I posted on Facebook on this topic that I thought it was everybody, of course, agrees with me, and then I put something, and a dear friend of mine actually posted something publicly commenting on, oh, I don't agree and all those things. And at that moment, I was so tempted to delete the entire post. Oh my gosh, and delete. But then I didn't do that. I said, okay, here's an opening. And we're not going to get into dialectic. We're going to get into dialogic space. So I invited her to actually, let's have a chat. Because somebody that I love you, and for you to disagree with me on this very topic of vaccination. So one of us was pro and the other one is anti. Excuse me. And I said, you must have a good reason because I want to learn your reason. So we got into this conversation about me telling her telling me, and we realized that we're both just scared.
Mm.
So coming to that listening, that radical listening, Christian, that you talk about, and attending to this, possibly it looks like tension, but that really taught me that how do we stay in that listening stance? I think that's what I think. But it gets tiring when it's somebody that lives with you, somebody who's so close to you, day in and day out, you have to argue. Then what do we do? So
Yeah.
maybe one last thing that I learned to do is, especially after my father passed, I am way more direct, especially being a Canadian, a woman, an Asian. It's hard to be direct at times. But now if somebody says something that's remotely offensive, I actually just stop and ask them. I said,
Mm.
sorry, your comment actually is sounding a little bit like a racist comment. I mean, is that your intention? I
Yes.
just simply say that. And I just check because I genuinely want to listen. So I think that's what helps me.
Thanks, Haesun. Can I jump in, Jim? Because Haesun, you'll verify this is true. I sent you a little message saying I admire how courageous you are. So I'm just reflecting on courage now, Jim, in relation to being a friend and befriending. Because that putting something out there about vaccination, whatever it was, for me, that's first act of courage because you're saying something that could be controversial. I think the second act of courage was not to get into dialectic, which is easier to do, to say, well, I'm deleting the post or I'm not talking to you anymore. But I think it takes an act of courage to say, actually, our relationship's more important to me than that. And I'm prepared to put myself out there, possibly get hurt, possibly get offended, possibly admit that I'm wrong. So acts of courage, and then maybe small acts of courage in the example that Haesun just gave at the end, Jim, around when we do hear statements like that, just raising awareness of how it comes across to check the intention, because maybe it was misinformed, maybe it was unintentional. So yeah, courage might play a part somewhere.
Yeah, I've got a couple thoughts, and then Michael, please jump in after I'm done here. But I like your concept of love as being at the heart of it, and I like the concept of dialogue. Asking the person that question, you know, can you help me understand what you're thinking here? You know, Robert Putnam had the question, what leads you to believe? It's a great dialogical question, I think. What leads you to believe? What's the assumptions behind this? But for me, the idea of love is at the heart of it. If I'm talking to someone and they know, I work from the assumption that there's inherent goodness in every person. It's just buried really deep in some people, but nonetheless, there's that goodness. And if I can look for the goodness in the other person and they see my question coming from a place of love, I think that works. I think the trouble with the courageous comment is sometimes I do it for me more than for them. And it's just actually to reinforce my views. So I can call people out and say, oh, that sounds to me like you're being a racist, but really what I'm saying is you're wrong to do that. Maybe that's what I have to do. But to me, the question is, what's the purpose of my comment? Is it going to help improve the world? Is a person going to hear it? Or is it just in order for me to look good in my eyes or something in terms of doing it? So the intent behind the question, can I understand you more because you're my friend and I love you and I want to know where it's coming from? That to me seems like a wise way to negotiate that situation.
Well, the things that are floating around my mind were a little adjacent to this conversation that we're going down. First is just sitting with the difference between being friendly, being civilized, seeing the human in the other person, and being a friend with somebody. And I think they're different things. And I think a lot of what we're talking about probably applies to both, but it feels often that we're talking about more in a friendly context at the moment. Somebody says this, I kind of know them a bit, and I want to resolve something. And so if I'm thinking about friendship in particular, the other thing I'm noticing is the conversation so far has been a lot around how do you manage the rifts in the friendship? Like, okay, so they say something weird or racist or weird and racist. And you're like, so how do I deal with
loud.
that? Yeah, and choose
Yeah.
loudly and all of that. And for me in my life anyway, that actually is not the issue. The issue is a lack of action rather than an excess of action. The issue is an atomization of people and their experience. So I'm like, look, I'm okay to tread on some toes if what I do is connect. I mean, just this week, I was part of what I've tried to do is this year or the last little while is to go, look, a lot of my friends are in Australia. I'm in Canada. And if I don't do something, I just never talk to these people. So I'm like actively trying to reach out and find ways of being in touch and interacting with people. And with a friend of mine, we were talking about something and I just took an action that was without his permission and I should have checked in on him. And I was like, oh man, I feel bad about that. And he called me on it and I apologized. And part of me is like, yeah, that was a screw up, but at least I got to do something and screw up rather than not do anything and have a flawless, unblemished record of complete inaction. So there's something for me around what energy do you put into the world? And part of what's hard about that is some people are just not that good at putting energy out into the world. And part of what I think being a good friend means is how much energy am I willing to invest in this relationship without necessarily getting all of that back? But I appreciate that's taking us off on a completely different tangent.
No, but I think that investment is not to adopt kind of a financial thing, but I think intention, things die without intention. If you don't pay attention to it, it's not going to flourish. So I think that is and I think too, we're all busy and it's very easy to not pay attention, to miss out on the chance to connect. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Michael, and this is also one of those friction points in a conversation, is that I feel like right now, Just to name drop a bit, this year our Don Deschler Award winner is Margaret Weasley, and I just spent a day with Margaret doing an interview with her because each year we celebrate someone Christian's one of the Don Deschler Award winners, people who without them we wouldn't be able to be who we are doing what we do. So I went to her, and we talked a lot about how people feel a lot of fear right now, and when people feel fear, sometimes they crave certainty, so they have black and white views of life. Sometimes they lash back, they have a lot of anger, they're not at their best. And I'm wondering what you think about how do we deal with people when we sense, I think this person is living with a lot of fear right now.
Well, it's if the way that manifests is like conflict or disagreement or accusations or blame or something disruptive in the in the relationship you have, I think it's really hard. And effectively, all I've got is banal truisms to mention, which is, assume positive intent. What's that quote? Be kind, everybody's fighting a battle or fighting a fight or wrestling a tiger or something. I'm not sure where that quote comes from. And also, in the end, you just get to work on your stuff and work on as a friend of mine said, look, your job is to work on the stuff on your side of the table. Their job is to work on the stuff on their side of the table. And so it's to have a degree of wisdom around what's on your side of the table and what's on their side of the table. And often what's on your side of the table is your choice on how to react to that piece. And we've talked about some of the tactics around curiosity, asking a good question, around that. But honestly, mostly, if you can just not immediately react, that's probably off to a really good start in the first 5 seconds.
There's something, though, about the way everybody here responds, the three of you, but I'll pick on you, Michael, which is a kind of a universally positive way of interacting. Now, we see each other in fragments. We don't spend days and days listening to each other eat or whatever it might be. But how do you go about maintaining that? You are intentionally positive in your interactions. How do you do that?
Well, there's part of it which I think is probably a wiring piece for me, which is like I think I'm wired to look to what's next, look to what the next opportunity is, to be confident and to encourage confidence in others. So I think that it's partly just having the good luck of a certain neurological connection of stuff in my brains, but it's also an active choice to amplify and strengthen those connections rather than not. And a key moment for me was my friend Mark Bowden, also Toronto based, although a Brit, and his company, his website is Truthplane, plane.com, and he's like, the response to everything is yes. He calls it the yes state, and he often doing that in the context of facilitation or teaching or influencing, where look, if you're running a group and you ask a question and somebody says, oh, here's my answer to your question, and it's some ludicrous answer where in your head you're like, oh, there's madness, I don't know, I mean, how could this even possibly cross their mind that this could possibly be an answer to that? I'm suddenly having a flashback to high school where in a biology class, the teacher asked something like, what's the layer of yellow stuff that's under the skin? And I think the answer was probably meant to be subcutaneous fat. And some guy in my class went, zucchini. I was like, that is so absolute and radically wrong. I don't even know where to go with that. But the point is, if you're doing this, if you go, well, that's a stupid answer, I mean, or that's just not a very good answer, I'm like, sorry, good try, but you're so wrong on that. All that does is make everybody nervous, make everybody anxious. You lose the psychological safety that you've been building. Whereas what I've learned to go is go, oh, interesting, maybe, oh, possibly, I hadn't thought of that. All the while nodding my head, all of which is around maintaining connection. So part of what I know about staying positive is it just gives me a better chance to stay connected and navigate the stuff that's weird or in between or nonsensical. Whereas if I'm negative, that's often a break in the connection.
I love it. Any other comments on this?
I'm just thinking about this idea of how, Michael, you were talking about investing. Like all of this is it takes a lot of
Does,
us,
yeah.
right? And I think about how sometimes it's much easier to just kind of like, forget it. That's it. And we cancel them. And then this whole idea of calling something out and then like that leads to canceling. But really, is it worth our time, energy, and like ourselves to invest in it? And this practice that I learned, it's called Calling In by Loretta J. Jones, I think, or
Oh,
J.
I love her
Ross.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Loretta
and
Ross, yeah.
I love this idea of how, first of all, we make that choice, and then we do it in a way that is really calling in, and that's sort of like inviting, embracing. I think it's just such a powerful way
I
of
love it.
connecting. Mm.
And my reflection on what Michael was saying is about, the number of friends who are the closest. And there's a interesting kind of paradox that's kind of coming up for me because, for our real dear friends, we want to be fully present. We kind of want to be at our best. I want to be positive and energetic. And at the same time, I've got this sense that I want to feel like I can do anything. I'm off the clock almost. Look, I'm going to chew loudly. I'm going to go have a meal with Haesun. I wonder, is that a part of friendship, which is I'm allowed to get things wrong. I'm allowed to say weird things, and the psychological safety there. And that's my curiosity now, I guess, is how do we get the balance right of being very intentional, very thoughtful, and I'm just me. This is me. And so with my best friends, I can just be me. Yeah, so that's a question that popped into my head as I was listening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm deliberately not wearing trousers right now, just as an expression of
you.
how comfortable I feel in this podcast.
We come to expect that from you, though, Michael. I know that's kind of your style. It's okay.
I don't mind it now, Michael. It was just when we were in that hotel in Paris.
Exactly.
I was
We're
like,
in the Four Seasons in Paris.
You should
I'm
have
like,
worn
please,
trousers.
underpants at a minimum, Michael. Come on, man.
Well, it is interesting, though, Christian, because I think as I'm just listening to this conversation, the intention is what creates the psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't pay attention, I don't have the opportunity for that kind of freedom with a person. And the second thing is that in true friendship, it's reciprocal. I can't ultimately be friends with someone who has nothing to give back. There's reciprocity. I can be friendly.
Yeah.
I can nourish the relationship. I can do the things that might open it up, but if nothing comes back, it's not really a friendship. It's something else.
I think it's the difference between performing being a friend and actually being a friend. And this last week, I had such a blessing of two unannounced visits from my friends. And they're both going through something very difficult. And they're now at this decision stage. And they decided to show up at my door. And when I pulled into my driveway and I was like just tight, very, for my next meeting, and then I saw her car, and I can clearly see that she's like distressed, and I took it as such a blessing that they can just show up, and I said, just wait for me in the backyard, and then I did my meeting and went out to meet them. And I think that idea of how to be a friend in those times, I think, Christian, like I would still choose to love you even if you chew really loud. and really in that,
She says that now, but do you believe her?
wait till we
I don't
sit
know.
down
She was
together, I'll be like,
she was pretty
God,
hardcore about the chewing thing at the top of the show.
She moved Christian
It's a
back
new
about
thing,
30 points on her list, I think.
Yeah.
And me.
And I think those are those conversations that I often think about. What does that mean to, is one thing to be a friend to somebody else like that, but am I inviting that kind of friendship from other people too? Can I
That's
go to
good.
somebody else's house unannounced when I am having the worst day? Do I have that? Do I allow myself to have that relationship? That's
Yes,
a
hey
different
son,
question.
drop by anytime.
Yeah.
I love that. So, a last question I want to ask is sort of a catch all. What else would you like to say? But the question is, what's one small practice that helps you show up better as a friend? And Christian, I'll start with you, following my little alphabetical pattern. What's one small thing that helps you show up better as a friend?
Yeah, I do think it's about, for me, I love learning. And one of the great things about this conversation is I just feel I have so much to learn from everyone here. So I think for me, that attitude of what can I learn through my relationships and my interactions makes me curious, inquisitive, admiring. So probably that's the thing is I'm always out there thinking, I've got so much to learn from these people, and having a good interaction will be helpful from that point of view as well.
Haesun?
I guess something small that I do with myself is that I need to have a little bit of time every day to reflect. And for me, it shows up as spiritual meditation. So without having that, I am slightly disheveled, I find. And I think another thing that I do with especially friends who are going through those decision making and especially that fear that you speak about, Jim, um, I take that pause that Michael you talk about, that taking that pause and simply asking, because when I hear fear, I also hear what they care so much about that they want to protect. They don't want to lose it. So then having that conversation, not about their fear, but something so important that they want to protect, I think that really strengthens the conversation. So I tend to really think about these phrases, good reasons. What are their good reasons behind that fear? What are their good reasons behind that worry? So what are their good reasons behind stupid decisions that they make? And really, like what are their good reasons? And I think that saves a lot of conversations actually for me. So that's what I find very helpful. Good reasons.
Michael?
So I talked about those 150 people, which is, I remember the name of the academic, Robin Dunbar, Dunbar, Dunbar. And so on my phone, and I'm holding this up to the camera, I've actually coded people so that I can tell where they fit on my list. I've got my 15 people who I mark with a love heart. I've got my D50 people, so the next 50 out, who have clapping hands. And then I have my D150, which is like a little green circle next to their name. And it means that I am actively going who is most important to me, which feels on the one hand vaguely terrible because it's like I can already hear listeners going, isn't it a little judgy? I'm like, no, it's a lot judgy. It is entirely judgy, which is like, who am I prioritizing in
I
my
love
life rather than being a passive recipient? Because I have just enough notoriety to have an endless amount of people to connect with if I want to do that. But I don't want to do that. I want to give the people who are my most important people all of my as much of my attention. So we've been using kind of financial language like investment, but I'm like, I want to spend my energy in the appropriate ways with the appropriate people. And it means that when I look at my phone, when I look at kind of my messages or whatever, I can actually go, am I happy with the combination of green circles, red love hearts, and yellow clapping hands I see in my texting and phoning of people? Is it telling me that I'm actually staying in touch with the people I want to stay in touch with?
I love it.
Michael, I have a question about that. So you meet a lot of people, and
I
then
do.
you meet somebody who's so cool that you want to include it in the green dot or
Yeah.
green. Then you have to make a choice.
Yeah.
How do
Well,
you do that?
I literally go, do I feel like the balance of energy is about right? And it doesn't have to be purely, a classic give and take. It doesn't have to be Adam Grant kind of like it needs to be a straight swap. Like there are people who I'm like, I definitely put in more energy and I'm totally happy with that. And other people I'm like, I'm getting, they're perhaps giving me more than I'm giving. So how do I feel about that? So
Wow.
I move people up and down. People get recategorized on a regular basis.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Very, very interesting. I'll tell you all one thing I see in you as people who act as in friendly ways. So, Christian, I love your embracing of the world. Christian has this story. He says, when I die, he said, if I go somewhere like heaven or whatever, I don't know where I'm going to go, but when I die, if there's someone there who says to me, you know,
Mm.
ask me about my life, I expect that he would say to me, you were in Galway Bay and the ocean was there. I made that ocean for you. Did you get in that ocean? Did you go swimming? So he sees all of life as a chance to say yes to different experiences. So he even flew on a kite where you're flying through the air like thousands of feet up in the air, and he's afraid of heights, but somebody asked him to do it, so he said yes. So I think that's one thing I see in you. Then Haesun, what I see in you is your intentionality with people, that people you're getting to, like, for example, when Christian came to Toronto, you took him up the CN Tower. When Sonia and Claudia were there, you went out of your way to be so hospitality, I'd say. Hospitality is a critical thing I see in you. And then Michael, with you, I think it's humor. I think the more comfortable you are teasing me, the more I feel like I could be maybe moving down a couple spots on his list. This could be going well for me here. It could be happening. So I think to me, humor is a huge thing for you in terms of how you open up friendships.
It is absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, so grateful to all of you. This is my dream come true, this conversation, and you haven't let me down. It's been a delight, and I feel inspired, encouraged, and hopeful in light of all you've said. Truly, I do. I feel that exactly. Thank you all so much, very much.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.